Stuff. Thank you very much. So this is the kind of say question. What is career readiness? How do we use that to support students to develop their employability? And this is based on a theory of a way of surveying students when they enroll at university every year as part of the online registration process. And the whole thing is called careers registration. It's a set of questions at enrollment that students answer, which tells us their state of career readiness. And they can be in stages that we call decide, plan, or compete. I'll go into this in a lot more detail as we go on, but hopefully that's what you're here to listen to and learn about. The way we kind of define the career readiness, as well as the stages of career planning in decide, plan, and compete. We're talking about things like career confidence, a student's preparedness for the workplace, and their preparedness in terms of their in terms of their application tools, their practiced responses, their CV, their ability to write really good personal statements, their interview practice. And as I say, their preparedness and their practice of those things, kind of generally knowing what to do in terms of finding jobs, in terms of requesting references, in terms of values matching, strengths assessment, self-awareness work, that sort of thing. So being able to know what to do. And do we think there are any others that I've missed as a careers professional? Please do chip in at any time in the chat if there are any others in terms of in career ready that you feel I've not articulated there in those 4 or 5 points. Not yet. Okay. Well, that must be quite comprehensive then. Well done, me. Right, we'll move on. Within C's, what are we trying to achieve? And this is our career readiness work does feed into this a hell of a lot. So the mission is to support students to transition into their professional careers and beyond. So a good graduate outcomes, a good graduate outcome for our students as measured in the graduate outcome survey, which is one of the university's main key performance indicators, is whether they get professional level work or whether they go on to further study at a higher level. So going on from undergrad to postgrad study is a positive result in terms of grad outcomes. Going on to any profession that is coded in the standard occupational classifications between 1 and 3 is also a positive outcome. And those are professional roles as identified in that classification. Okay. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to achieve that. That's the main mission. By doing things with data that we can filter, that we can target for maximum impact, where we have a potential a transferable methodology to measure impact, where we're trying to do as much bespoke careers messaging and support as we can with students at the scale that works in terms of the resources we have, which is a big challenge. And we want really informed staff about all of this and really self-aware students. And the career readiness stuff has been a real ambition of ours as quite a leading institution on the careers registration program to make students aware of their planning stages. Most institutions don't do that. We do. And I'll show you what that looks like as we go through the presentation. So self-aware students in terms of their career planning can be beneficial, and it moves them along a little bit further and a little bit quicker. And we have some proof of that in the data as well. Oh, I've got one chat message. How best can I plan to be ready for my career in my 1 year? Okay, well, let's go through some of the slides to begin with, and then we'll take that. Hopefully we'll answer some of that as we go along, Kumar. But you can always pick that up at the end if we haven't covered it. The careers registration for the University of Exeter is a set of 8 questions. They are strategic performance indicators rather than one of the 13 key performance indicators for the university. The only one we have for employability in the key performance indicators, as I've mentioned, is graduate outcomes. But we use careers registration to inform strategy, to target our work. We use it to direct interventions to the people that need it most. The survey itself, as I said, is part of the enrollment process every year for a student when they enroll and re-enroll. And it's also, there's an exit version of it that is presented to students as they sign up for graduation when they leave. So for a 3-year undergrad, we're going to have 4 data points. We're going to have start of first year, start of second year, start of final year, and end of final year. So we're going to have 4 years worth of these questions for hopefully every student that completes the online registration process. It helps us to give us a bit of an idea of follow-up work, therefore, when we've done the exit survey, because we know who is looking likely to be employable, who is looking less likely to be employable, and therefore we'll do some follow-up work at the 6-month post-graduation point to ask our graduates how they're getting on and whether they're in the right sort of graduate outcomes for them and whether they need further career services. So it helps us to give us some targeting of that work as well. And in the past couple of years, our careers registration information has been filterable by WP markers, which is exceptionally helpful for us to see whether or not there are groups of students in WP cohorts that need specific support as well, or indeed groups of students in particular WP cohorts who are doing very well, and to investigate why they might be doing very well. Okay, these are the questions. The first 3 are nationally shared, and careers registration as a process happens in more than 60 institutions now across the UK. Exeter was one of the first when we got some hefty funding back in 2017 to start this off. And so we therefore have a good 6 or 7 years of careers registration data and can start to do some decent trend analysis with some of it. The shared questions are around career journey stage, so that is the career readiness question. The second question there about being prepared, preparedness and confidence, also a measure of career readiness. And the level of work experience or the amount of work experience that a respondent has gained in the past 12 months is also a really important and shared question amongst most of the institutions that do careers registration. The others are more unique to Exeter. We have selected those to figure out a little bit more about sort of regionality, sectors of interest and feedback for the service as a whole. It is looking likely that there might be some national data sets of this coming quite soon. There's a data sharing agreement that's looking likely to be put in place so that we can see a national picture of at least question 1 here, but potentially questions 1, 2, and 3 across those users who want to sign that data sharing agreement. So we may have a national data set, which would be really useful. So those are the questions, and I should stop there. Do you have any questions about those? Just checking the chat. I can see now where my chat is on this shared screen, so I can check it myself, Kelly. So nothing coming in. All right, let's move on. So does it help? Yes, it does help. We run the numbers against graduate outcomes for most years that we have the information. And what we do is, in this instance, we've looked at the change between the second year responses to this question and the final year responses to this question. So has there been some movement in somebody's career planning between years 2 and final? If there's been positive movement in their career planning in that year between those 2 survey points, then their graduate outcome score is, in this instance, in this year, it's 6% higher than our 80% graduate destination score in the grad outcome survey. So that's significant, that's 6%. That's quite a large uplift. If somebody does some career planning between start of second year and start of final year, they're likely to do more of that in final year, and they are certainly proven to be more employable at that high graduate level. Interestingly, if they've moved backwards in the decide, plan, and compete stages, and they've actually slipped back and thought, well, I was competing for jobs perhaps in, I don't know, film and TV, but I've changed my mind and now I want to look at planning for getting some more work experience in nature conservation because I've changed my ideas about what sector I want to work in. That is also positive according to the graduate outcomes scores. So you can see there a 2.3% uplift against the average for the university. So if somebody moves backwards on that scale, they're still thinking about their careers and they're still doing career planning. And that means they're engaging and it means they're working towards something. It's those who do nothing that you can see quite a significant drop off. So neutral means there's been no movement. It signifies that there may have been no engagement in careers in that year. We can test that in other ways to see if that is true, but they certainly haven't progressed their career thinking and their career readiness. And so that, what is that, minus 8.3% there on the average is huge as well. So we don't want people to do nothing, absolutely not. So that's what it can do for us. And it's kind of like an early warning indicator for us to say, okay, well, we've got this information and we've got it to a program level. Let's start seeing whether or not we need to intervene with certain groups of students. Okay, moving on. So I was talking about earlier being a fairly leading institution in terms of making sure that the students know about this, called socializing the concept. I think I will be writing a piece on a careers registration national guide on socializing the concept with students. And I think the University of London in their online career service are starting to do this as well. So there's only a couple that are really making students overtly aware of this. So what we've tried to do here at Exeter since probably 2019, so maybe for about 5 years, although a couple of them were COVID years, we've tried to label up our services. So the idea being that if somebody doesn't know what career they want to go into yet, there's very little benefit in them practicing their interview technique or applying for jobs at this stage. So they should be looking at activities and interventions that are labeled decide. If they are ready to compete for jobs and they've got everything sorted in terms of their toolkit, they know which sector they want to work in and they're actively applying, then they probably need to be looking at services labeled compete. And in the in-between, you've got plan, which is, and the sections are up there. It says, I'm ready to apply for further study. I've been applying, but I've not been successful. I want to gain some more experience, those sorts of things. Yeah, that's a really important phase. And a lot of people in the plan phase are getting work experience through applying for things like placements. So they might be doing a lot of their placement thinking and their placement activity, or preparing for that. And so it doesn't traditionally follow years 1, 2, and final year specifically closely, but you could say that most of the competitors are in the final year. And you could say that a large proportion of the planners are in the year before they might go out for their placement year. Okay. So there is a kind of timeline to this, and I'll show you that later as well. We've done lots of resource signposting and website work. We've created a few direct mail campaigns to students who have told us they're in these brackets. So after enrollment completes, I think it's at the end of September, and we get the data, we will then ping out some emails to the Decide students and say, okay, you told us you're in Decide. Here's what we call an email sprint, which is one email every week for 3 weeks saying, you told us this, that's interesting, here's some things you could look at. And the next one might progress that to say, you know, an activity in Decide that you might want to consider is having your first careers conversation with a professional. And then the final thing is, do you know about our careers fairs? Would you like to sign up to attend one in October or November? So that might be the way we would construct an email sprint for somebody who's told us they're a Decide student. We've done some promo videos, we've done some student video logs. I'd like to do lots more of that kind of shows peer-to-peer that students are aware of this. They know what it means and they know what they're going to do next because of that. So we'd like to do lots more short form video on that. So that's something we'll do a little bit more of. We've done promo of Decide, Plan, Compete, including animations on TV screens around campus. Hopefully you've seen those. We've also done that in the form of the career timelines. I'll show you an example of that in a slide in a minute. And hopefully you've also seen those all around campus. The idea of the timeline is that students by year and by term can see the activities that they might want to do next, and they'll be labeled Decide, Plan, and Compete again so that they can self-identify. We've got some of the data linked to lead indicators in the MI Hub. So that's good progress. What we then need to do is probably socialize this a little more with academic members of staff so that they kind of know what they're looking at, and can be supported to talk to us about spending resource in the right areas within their departments, within their programs. And we do that in faculty employability meetings where I present some of the data and we talk about how we can make recommendations based on evidence within departments, but at a faculty level mainly, so that it trickles down through the employability champions in that faculty. It says college reporting, that should say faculty reporting, my apologies, but yes, that's what I've just described. And then we've also done some more peer-led work recently where we've done a kind of health check or a career journey check where the student staff that work in my team will have a kind of 10-minute discussion related to somebody's planning stage. So if their career readiness stage is identified as compete and they're talking to potentially a third year in a kind of drop-in situation, then they will lead them through a checklist of activities. You know, have you done this? How confident are you with your interview practice? Where are you looking in your job search? Those are the sorts of questions that we would ask on a checklist related to compete in our peer-to-peer health checks. That might be quite interesting to Emma on the call and maybe some others who are talking about peer mentoring and things like that. I think that could be applicable more broadly. At the moment, I'm in a little bit more control of it because it's trained students who work for the career zone who deliver this, but I don't know if it needs to be going forwards. I think if the main area of this is to get a relevant piece of activity done by more students and to raise the awareness, then potentially we could roll that out beyond the career zone through peer mentoring or through whatever it might be. Okay, so I was talking about the timeline. This one is way confusing, but it's one of reference for me, which I put on the big wall in the old library and on the banners and things in the career zones. That is everything on our timeline. But as I say, we split that. So there's a first year version of this, and there's a second year and a final year version of this, and there's also a postgraduate version. And so, you know, you can have this as kind of a wall chart sort of thing for students. You can have this as potentially as a tutor if you're supporting a student and going, okay, well, I know you're in first year. Let's see, have you done these things on the timeline? And once again, you can see the D, P's and C's in there. We're trying to promote student self-awareness. So, okay, I'm a first year and I'm in the decide phase. Looks like there's at least 3 or 4 things labeled up decide that I can do in the first year. And believe me, for most first years, that would be plenty in terms of careers activity. If we can get them doing 4 or 5 things in the first year of being at the uni, we've been doing very well. Some are far more engaged, of course, and some not engaged at all until it's time to apply for a job. So this is helpful nudge theory, I think. Okay, time for a discussion. I wasn't aware how many people we might get in this group, but what we're going to probably do with the 10 or a dozen or so people in here is have an open discussion, and feel free to start talking or put it in the chat. I'll have a look at our chat questions in a second, catch up with myself. The first thing we're going to ask you is, what should we as a careers service try next with this careers registration, careers readiness information? Is there something that you think we should try next? And the things I've been thinking about recently are these: curriculum integration, broad student engagement, as I mentioned before. I've probably given one away by talking about mentoring, but you know, new digital solutions, and more granular data analysis, that sort of thing. So have a think about what we could do with this to develop it even further, and I'm open to your suggestions. You won't be surprised to see that the next slide might be more about what you could do with this information, and I'm equally prepared to help you figure out what you could potentially do with this stuff. So does anybody have any suggestions for me about what we should try next with careers readiness information?
Hi, Ollie, can I ask a question if that's right? I
Yes, of
did put
course
it
you
in the
can.
I did put it in the chat actually, but just this is my first full year at Exeter, and I've taken the employability academic lead for sport and health sciences. I just want to check how much of that data, if any of that, comes or can come to us directly, sort of narrowed down, because I think that would be really helpful to be able to see how it works, whether at a faculty, I mean, ideally at a course level, but I appreciate, that's time consuming and somebody needs to number crunch out. But is that something that happens or could be something in the future?
Yes, it could. I always say that I'm happy to have conversations with people, and then I'm kind of hoping that the 42 or 44 different departments don't all want an individual conversation.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm certainly happy to guide people through this. There is a file on the MI Hub under the Education tab for careers registration, and there is something there that's filterable, um, and we'll show you the responses to the questions filtered down by program and by lots of other slices. So there is a self-service approach to this, but I appreciate that staff need to know what they're looking at before they do too much of that. So very happy to guide people through that, and perhaps one day I should do a recorded video on it so that everybody can just follow my clicks, and get to where they need to get to. So good question. Hopefully I've answered that. I'll take an individual approach. There is a self-service approach, and I think I'll probably need to do some sort of recorded approach as well in the future.
Great. And thanks for that. How would we access that then? Is it directly requesting from you, or to hunt to find the right bit, on the management system?
No, that can come through to any member of the careers team. It normally
Right.
comes direct through to me in the end. Every faculty will have more than one, in most cases, lead officers who attend the main employability groups on a termly basis. So you were sports and health sciences, so you'd be working with Anna Brooking.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so there is an equivalent of Anna within each faculty that will take questions from academics and link up with me, and then we'll find the right response.
Great, thanks.
Okay, some good questions there. Um, I had another question in the chat. Is careers registration available to PhD students, or mainly undergraduate and or masters? Do you mean is the data available to look at for PhD students, or do you mean is there data on PhD students? Would you like to answer that? I think if you're a member of staff, like I've described to Lindsay, you can find the information on the MI Hub, or we can talk you through it. And I know that a lot of PGRs are members of staff, but yeah, we do have near enough 100% response rate to the careers registrations survey for all undergrad and PG taught students. Some PGRs have found a way to opt out, which I need to perhaps close the loophole on that. But we do have information for all undergrad and all PGTs. So if it was that, yeah, data on PhD students. So probably more of a conversation between myself and staff in the doctoral college to see whether or not we can identify the career readiness of PhD students, because of course that's quite sector specific. It should be about thinking about potentially going into academia, not always, and that's why the doctoral college handle a lot of the career support for the PhDs and the early careers researchers. But that's a good suggestion. We should put our heads together on that. Maybe maybe there's a gap in the data for that. Any
Ollie,
other
I
suggestions?
had a question about the data. With you had that bit about the neutral movers are the ones that you target move, as in they don't move. Is that the same regardless of if they're neutral at plan or neutral at compete, or have you looked at the breakdown?
That figure was for all students who hadn't done any movement. So that
Mm-hmm.
could have been they stayed in compete. It
Yeah.
could have been they stayed in plan, or indeed stayed in decide. But it's all students who didn't do any movement at all.
So I wondered, yeah, if you looked at the breakdown, whether there would be differences between different groups.
Yeah, there's likely to be less movement between years 1 and 2, for example. Lots less movement. So your decides will stay in decide for longer at that stage within their university lives. There's also situation whereby you have rapid movement because of the interventions we have. So there's certain interventions within the business school which will move people rapidly through the stages. So you'd have more people who are self-identifying as compete by the start of their second year. So that sort of thing happens. When you break down sort of the neutral side of things, and you look, for example, at final year neutral decide students, that's your red flag group. So those are people who are going to leave. They're still in the early stages of career planning, and the data's telling us they haven't done very much. And we can verify that data by other information we have about their engagement with our activities. So have they had an appointment? Have they attended an event? Have they attended a fair? If the answer to that is no, not very much, then that probably requires some form of direct intervention. And we do things like that, Rosie, as you'll know. We do things for things like get ready to graduate for finalists and third year support, whereby we are really targeting people who haven't done very much yet with interventions.
And I suppose you're limited because obviously you do the survey at the point of enrollment, but have you considered surveying them multiple times in the year, or even just once more in the year? Because like you said, with the rapid, we see students progress so quickly through a term. Have you considered that to get more data points?
I've considered that every year we've run the survey. And as I mentioned, 60 plus institutions do this. There's only one I know of that is starting to implement that more frequent change in status, or the student's ability to change their own status, perhaps in a system. And that's Leeds. And this whole thing started in Leeds in 2016, the year before we came on board. And so Leeds haven't done this for 7 years. They've finally bitten the bullet, Rosie, and they're going to implement this sort of self-change in status through their system this year. So I'm going to watch with bated breath to see whether or not that comes with as many pros as it could come with cons. I get the evolution. If we're making students self-aware, then they may be self-aware enough to say, well, I've evolved, I've moved on. I need to let somebody know that that's not my status anymore. What we have at the moment is near enough 100% benchmark 4 times a year. We run the risk of maybe eroding those benchmarks if changes for maybe 10% of the cohort has happened mid-year. So I'm going to use Leeds as a case study, Rosie, and see how they get on.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. I just wondered. That's interesting. Cool. Thank you.
Really good questions. Believe me, we've thought about it. I just think maybe we're a little bit conservative there and wondering whether it will damage such an important data set. Because we're near enough 100% response rate with this, it's becoming more and more important as the grad outcome survey, for example, the response rate there gets fewer and fewer every year for us. It's now less than 50% response rate for the graduate outcome survey. So we need something else like this, something more immediate with a high response rate. So I wouldn't want to jeopardize that side of it.
Yeah, I suppose if you linked it to something like module selection or something that's like compulsory, I guess like you do with enrollment, that could be a point to do it. Yeah, I'm sure you've thought of that, but
I mean, technically we've been lucky to maintain these 8 questions as part of a very long registration process for students in September, and every year I'm under pressure to give some ground, but I don't.
Yeah.
So I imagine trying to get these questions established in someone else's survey somewhere else in the university will also be challenging.
Yeah, definitely. I just wondered with the targeted stuff, whether, yeah, from a student perspective, if they do change, you know, making sure it's as relevant as possible. But I do completely understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of our peer-led health checks might be helpful for that. Because then a student might have told us themselves that they feel they've moved on a bit, and we can provide the right information for them at that stage. Okay, really good question. Are there any other questions or suggestions that we as a service could do to evolve this? If not, I'm going to move on to suggesting what is it that you as staff who now know a little bit more about careers registration, you may be in different areas, you may be in academia, you may be in, don't know, tech support, peer support as Emma is. So what could you as staff do with this information to support this, and what help would you need from us? So here I'm thinking about how you may be able to get more familiar with the concept, how you may be able to integrate it into things that you run, how you may be able to help us to signpost and to build that student self-awareness, and how you might want to work with us. As Lindsay and I just had a discussion about how we might work with employability champions in the academic side of things. So that's that sort of suggestion there. So have a think. What do you think you might do next to help to roll out this concept? Always the most challenging question, I suppose.
I definitely see, because for our peer mentors, we tend to send them out things like once a month, sort of like just so you're aware that this is happening in case you want to pass it on to the people you're mentoring.
Yeah,
I definitely see sort of a place for us if there's a certain time of the year where you particularly want to signpost. I appreciate it'll be all year, but if there's a time of the year in particular you want students to be aware of, you should be thinking about this, we can flag that in the comms that we send out to the mentors so that they can pass it on.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I mean, any form of more integrated signposting so that it's part of building up your own message. It's a win-win, isn't it?
Definitely, because especially the ones who are meeting on an informal basis and sort of are thinking of things that they want to check in with their mentees on, this might be something that we say, oh, you might want to check in on whether they've thought about going to the career zone or if they've thought about any of that yet. So
yeah, I will try and ask a bit of a leading question to the people in the chat here. We've been having some internal discussions about skills and employability skills as part of learning objectives within modules, but also skills development extracurricular, and how a student might once again sort of self-assess their confidence in those skills. It might be teamwork, commercial awareness, it might be project management, it could be anything that they go, okay, well, if there was a place for me to look on a framework and go, I need to develop that because I want to be in this sector, can I self-assess my skill, go on a skills development journey with the career zone, and then sort of reassess that? So that comes into this as we evolve the concept. In my mind, career readiness and career confidence comes into skills development because it's once again a self-assessed measure of confidence. So I think that's a level of solution that I'd like to investigate. I necessarily lead on sort of student portfolios and skills development, so it's something that we'd have to have a wider discussion about. Anybody else, any thoughts on what you might be able to do with this? Okay, then, nothing more in the chat. Let's move on. There are other ways of measuring what we do in career service, and we've alluded to a couple of them, so I'll just cover those here. We talked about graduate outcomes. For those unaware, it's a post-graduation survey that HESA runs. We do not run it. HESA runs it nationally, and the census date for that is 15 months after you leave the university. So a graduate, excuse me, will be getting that survey around that time, and they'll be saying, 15 months after I left the university, I am now doing the following job for the following salary in the following area. And they will answer a number of other questions about whether or not I'm using what I learned in my degree, or whether or not it's met my expectations in terms of what I was intending to do. So lots of questions there, and we cross-reference that with our careers readiness data, as I've shown you a couple of examples of, but we do a lot more of that. But career engagement data, and by that I mean we measure exactly how many inquiries, exactly how many appointments, events, careers fairs, student logins, interventions that students do with our service. So like I said before, we can see whether or not somebody's involved in their career planning, but also whether or not they've done very much in the past 6, 12, 18 months, whatever the time period might be. LEO is a data set that's on the MI Hub. LEO stands for Longitudinal Educational Outcomes. It's a tax record data set. So it looks at UK tax records. So it's only relevant to the people who are working in the UK. But it basically tells you what people are earning according to UK tax records, 1, 3, 5, and 10 years after they leave, I believe. It's quite a static, it's quite I guess it's a bit of a blunt tool, this one, because earnings potential, I mean, it is important to some people. It's not the be all and end all for other people. It can be down to program level. So you can do kind of an average earnings 3 years after you leave for all of your programs as well. I've mentioned the MI Hub, so we've got LEO on there, we've got graduate outcomes on there, and we've got careers registration on there. We've also got a report on our 6-month careers survey, which we run in-house, to help us to support graduates before they answer their grad outcomes questions. So we've got quite a lot of data on the MI Hub already that people can access. And like I said to Lindsay, I'm very happy to show people around that. We've got some work for the access and participation plan. So Cs will lead on the progression element of the access and participation plan. So there may be some gaps, for example, in WP students, particular characteristics where there's a gap in their graduate outcomes score. That used to be for mature students. At the moment, the gap is around people with social or mental disabilities, and for people who are from low social economic backgrounds. Those are the two gaps in progression that we need to use some of our APP data to look at. Of course, the OFS, helpful as they are, have their own dashboards and their own methodologies for working out those dashboards. So they're things that we look at also. Again, that's gaps analysis and benchmarking against other institutions. We've got impact research. So a couple of things we're doing funded by JISC at the moment is to look at things like the theory of change model and the contribution analysis methodology to see whether or not particular aspects of our careers interventions are impactful. The one we're looking at that's been funded is our global leaders experience. So it's sending students away for a week somewhere across the sea, somewhere in normally it's somewhere in Europe, and they do a week's of work related and work experience over there and some group work and things. Hugely impactful. We're told anecdotally. What we're trying to do is prove that from a data perspective. And then of course we've got student feedback, so we get a good amount of feedback on all of our events, appointments, fairs, and we also try and generate peer-generated feedback through our career checks that I mentioned before. So they're also giving us feedback on the service there. So that's the sort of other data sources we have, and we try and triangulate a lot of those to help people to deliver the right interventions at the right time. I talked about career engagement data, so this is kind of what I mean by that. As I said, appointments, events, system logins, inquiries, whether or not that's in person or over email or on the live chat, through our print systems, so through our digital platforms, through our website, as I've suggested there. So I don't think there's much else to say about that slide. I don't think there's many more to come, so hopefully not too much death by PowerPoint. And moving forward, we might have said a few of these in the suggestions you made to me. So moving forward, we're going to extend some of our impact project work with the GISC, as we've done with TASO. Last year, we've got work we've done with GISC this year. So we'll put that into, as part of the funding, we'll be putting that into Prospects Luminate and generating a bit of a noise about sort of impact evaluation there. So hopefully we can find some colleagues to collaborate with as well. Need to figure out whether some of our methods we're using are transferable. So, you know, will they work for other interventions, for example? Will some of our targeted work as well for, I don't know, new starters as it would for third years? I know the need is greater for third years, but there could be something we do with new starters that we're not currently doing using a targeted approach. So that sort of thing. Can we transfer this to other cohorts if we've got the resource to do so? Yeah, always looking to affect decision making and put the resources in the right places. And do we alter careers registration? These 8 questions have been around for a few years now. And the good thing with that is we've got trend data and we're building up a really nice database using the same questions. Do we alter the questions always comes up. I don't think I would ever alter the first 3, but we may wish to tweak some of the other ones that we ask. Again, with the permission of our lovely enrolment support team. And as part of Curriculum for Change, we would like to do lots more discussions with our academic colleagues to see whether or not any of the Curriculum for Change agenda can be supported by an evidence-based approach to, you know, the right influences of sort of employability within the new Curriculum for Change model. So we'd love to get lots more stuff in the curriculum. I know there's only so much credit going around, but if we can use some of our evidence to suggest what might be best to use and to put into the curriculum, then that would be really, really helpful, I'm sure. Any questions on any of that? Because that is the end of my slideshow and I'm going to stop sharing. So we do